Talk about those talks now with our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clarke, who's here to discuss, well, it could be pivotal for negotiations, Michael, certainly significant, but tell us more about who's in the room, because that shows us just how big a deal, or not, potentially, this could be.
Yeah, I mean, the Ukrainians have sent a very important delegation, a delegation that could do a lot of negotiating if necessary. So they're led by Rustem Umerov, who was the defence minister, who's now on the National Security and Defence Board.
Yeah.
And he's very skilled. I mean, he's a Tatar, speaks lots of languages. He's a bright guy, but Zelensky moved him because he got involved in the corruption scandal.
Yeah.
So Zelensky's trying to distance himself from that. And he's with Budinov. And Budinov is the chief of staff now, who took over from Andriy Yermak again because of the corruption scandal. And Budinov, again, was the head of military intelligence. He's kind of law unto himself. Again, very bright man. And Zelensky now seems to trust him. And Kizlytsya is there as well, who's Budinov's deputy. So they've got a high-level team. They've got Natov, who's the chief of the general staff, the chief of the army. So he's there. And they've got a good team. The Russians have not really sent a politically important team. So they've got Kostyukov, and Kostyukov, he's an admiral, and is the head of the GRU, which is military intelligence. And he's been in that job, I think, since 2018. Quite unusual for an admiral to get it. He's sanctioned by the EU, and he's sanctioned by the United States because of alleged involvement trying to corrupt the 2016 presidential election in America. But he's an absolute toughie. He's a no-compromise man. Putin obviously trusts him. But he's there. We don't know who else is there. It looks as if it's going to be an entirely military delegation. So I think the Russians are going with military specialists who won't have the authority to talk politics. And the Ukrainians are going with a range of people. So I think this shows the Russians aren't taking this terribly seriously. They want to go and say, these are our terms, what's your problem? You know, if you're going to do this or this on the ground, then we'll talk about the specifics. But they're not there to discuss the nature of the issue, I don't think.
And the main term is still one of territory, isn't it? We've talked a lot about the significance of the Donbass. We mentioned earlier that 90% of it is controlled by Russia now, but still Ukraine doesn't want to cede any of it.
About 80%, yeah.
80%.
Yeah, the Ukrainians are holding on to about 20%. So on the map there, it's the grey area to the west. That's the bit they've still got. So they've lost most of Luhansk, which is the northern part of the Donbass, and the southern part of the Donbass. They've held on to most of that. So they've got about 20% of it in their control. And this is what it's really all about, the fortress cities. So there's 4 big fortress cities, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druskivka, and Kostiantynivka, all part of Donetsk. And the Ukrainians have pretty well lost Pokrovsk, but not entirely. The Russians have said 3 times they've taken it, but they're not in full control of Pokrovsk.
It's just taken an awful long time for the Russians to get there.
23 months.
There you go.
Yeah, they took Avdiivka, which is down sort of to the southeast of Pokrovsk, 23 months ago, and Pokrovsk was the next obvious target. And remember, they took Bakhmut over 2 years, well, almost 3 years ago now. And they still can't take the fortress cities. And the reason is partly because they're very well defended, but also because they occupy the high ground. And this is why, quite apart from the military issue, this is why the Ukrainians won't give it up. Because the high ground, there's the fortress cities. The high ground to the west of it, the ground goes much lower. It drops down right to the river Dnieper. And so if they give up those fortresses, the Russians in a future offensive will find it much easier to sweep westwards right up to the Dnieper River. They're beyond Dnipro, the city. And they'd have a pretty clear push then against Kiev itself. And what the Ukrainians say, and what the rest of us say, is if the Ukrainians did give up those fortress cities, then Russia would certainly attack again at some point in the future. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever.
Because Putin would still desire making Ukraine a part of the Russian Federation.
Correct. I mean, he's always said that. He's written it. There's no mystery about that.
Yeah.
I mean, he says that, or he implies he'd settle for the Donbass now for a ceasefire, but nobody thinks that that's the extent of his ambitions. Because, I mean, all the evidence is that he regards Ukraine as an illegitimate state, that it should be part of Russia, it doesn't have any right to exist. He wants the whole of Ukraine. And what he's really saying is, well, I'll settle for the Donbass for now, and we'll all take a break, and then we'll see where we are. And we all know where we'll be after that. At some point, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, he will try and take the rest of Ukraine.
So to sum up, Michael, today's talks are significant, but you're not optimistic that anything tangible is going to come out of them.
No, I mean, I think the best that might come out of them would be the facilitation of a bigger summit in a month's time. You should then be properly prepared instead of this sort of last-minute, last-gasp stuff, which is always the Trump way. I mean, they always create these summits which everybody's scrambling to get ready. Yeah. So a properly prepared summit in a month's time in which the big political decisions might be made, that's probably the best we can expect. The
leaders, perhaps, the presidents together?
Yeah, it would have to be leaders. And it has to be somewhere else. So Trump and Putin and Zelensky would have to effectively go into a room together. And I mean, Putin says he won't go into a room with Zelensky. Zelensky says, I'll go into a room with Putin, but not in Moscow, because Zelensky wouldn't come back from Moscow, unquestionably. So it has to be somewhere else. But, some big moment would then have to occur where the leaders went into a room and agreed a ceasefire, which had been well worked out with the details, and they go and they sign it. But the best will in the world, we're weeks away from that.